It's something that I can't come to understand. There are so many people within death row that claim that they love Tupac. How come no one has stepped up, come forward, put up $100,000, $500,000 reward for justice of his murder? Where's all the love for Pac from death row, from the people, and from the friends supposedly around him at death row? Where is the love for Pac? Let's bring justice for Tupac Shakur. I believe he's resting in peace in heaven, but on this earth, I bet you he's turning in his grave.
The exact same tactics that were used to drive the biggest acts out of Death Row Records, 15 years later, were being used against people like me, independent journalists. And I think that if people really knew the man behind the curtain, they'd think a lot differently about the murder of Tupac Shakur.
Don't make me have to play with you. That's just the tap that the principal used to give you with the ruler. Nigga, I'm gonna spank your ass. Say another word. I promise you, I want you to. Let's play. Let's have fun. Let's have a 2024 great year, Negro. Cause I play both sides. Both sides, you know that. We can play it on social media. Nigga, please, okay? Either way. Because you ain't gonna be able to say, oh, it jammed. It jammed when I was getting out of the trash can. I was in the trash can and it... You ain't gonna be able to say that with me, nigga. They gonna be saying, oh, R.I.P. That's what they gonna be saying. You come fucking with Reggie, R.I.P.
By the year 2009, the Tupac murder investigation remained at a standstill. It saw Frank Alexander release a third documentary, doubling down on the contention that at least at some level, Death Row Records had an involvement in the shooting.
You, Layla, and Glow, I believe it's going to bring a lot to this here Reckoning Part 2. Because Part 1, we really, I mean, you haven't watched it yet. You need to watch them in some time.
I will.
We put it out there.
And while the film was made with the cooperation of Tupac's estate at the time, the movie struggled to find its audience. But speaking of struggles, the LAPD task force led by Greg Kading was also suffering from a credibility issue. In less than a year after 4 convictions were overturned in Kading's other big case, Kading was removed from his task force, where it looks like he began making copies of the entire Shakur and Wallace case file. We just didn't find out why for another 2 years.
And then I never saw or heard of Kading again.
Right.
Yeah, I think that was his last day on the task force, I believe. And I got rumoredly that the prosecutor, the federal prosecutor, said that you're done. I don't want to even hear or talk to you ever. I don't want to see you. And then it was shortly thereafter I heard that he left the department. I couldn't find out if he was fired, or he quit in lieu of, or he retired in lieu of, but I just found out he was none of the department anymore.
If you pay attention to that timeline, right after Kading leaves the task force, Los Angeles police on Kading's task force suddenly change tactics, and they offer the Las Vegas police the opportunity to question Duane Davis about the Shakur murder. But there are strings attached. Wouldn't you think, to save themselves a headache, that they would want to solve it? So even when Los Angeles police tell Vegas the only interview they'll get with Davis has to be in Los Angeles, of course they are going to go. Oh, and I forgot one thing. Los Angeles police insisted that Greg Kading's partner and friend Darren Dupree also be in the room during the interview.
But if I were Long, I would have wanted to speak with Keefe and another Las Vegas PD officer with me and not had LAPD inside there. I want to speak to my witness with my other partner, but I don't need LAPD in there. There's no reason for that. Why are they in here?
But on September 9th, 2009, Detective Long from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department met with the man Mr. Kading said was part of a murder.
And Kading's not here. He'd been taken off the case. With Kading's arrogancy, there is no way this would have taken place without him if he was still on the task force.
You're not going to hear Greg Kading tell you that one. The other thing you won't hear Greg Kading explain is why anyone thought it was a good idea to coerce a witness. Because in that very Davis interview, the moment Vegas steps out of the room, documents show Dupree coaching Davis on what to tell Vegas. He even tells Davis where to limit his story so he can, quote, sleep at night.
In reading this transcript, once Detective Long leaves the room and you've got Darren Dupree and it looks like the attorney, they're completely leading Keefe on what to say and to stick to the story and not let Keefe speak freely. And instead, they're putting words in his mouth to say, this is what you need to state during this interview. If you stick to this story, you'll sleep well. If you don't stick to this story, you're not going to sleep well, and we're going to potentially cause problems for you, which is complete police coercion, which is crazy. It's not acceptable. It's hard to be believed, but I'm reading it, so yeah.
Now, I can't sit here and tell you that Mr. Davis was a genius for telling this story outside of the Proffer session and after the Proffer session and then writing a book about it and going on several YouTube channels to promote the story. But what I can question is whether or not Mr. Davis actually had any latitude to ever change that story or any motivation to recant the story out of fear for what might happen to him if he didn't tell the same story over and over again. He still had to answer to a detective that was on the Los Angeles Police Department who had a reputation of penalizing people that broke with the story they had agreed to tell. So if Mr. Davis says, well, I didn't really mean it, or I was put up to it, or I just told them what they wanted to hear in the Proffer session, then you run the risk of pissing off somebody on the LAPD who's got a proven track record of hitting back if you change the story.
If you don't support the narrative, there will be retribution.
The real takeaway from the George Torres Ramos case isn't the fact of whether or not Greg Kading told a lie or whether or not he had, as the judge said, reckless disregard for the truth. That's immaterial, and it's a deflection. What's important about the George Torres Ramos case is that Mr. Kading was shown offering witnesses and informants money, cars, houses. So it doesn't really come as a surprise that by the time Keith Davis walked into a Proffer session with Mr. Kading, we don't know what was told or promised to Mr. Davis prior to that meeting.
I feel like that there is a race to shape the narrative. Anytime new evidence is presented against the standard, it was Orlando Anderson, it was Keith Davis. But it was only a couple years before Kading showed the world what he had been working on since he'd left the police department. The 2011 book, Murder Rap.
What do you say to people who would say that Detective Kading retired and just wrote a book to profit from the death of these two stars?
Obviously, again, I retired and wrote a book, so there's truth to that. So I guess it comes down to what was the motive.
And this is nothing against Greg Kading. I don't have a problem with Greg Kading. I've never met him, and I've never spoken to him. Mm-hmm. But what I have a problem with is if you obtain evidence that you think can help the Las Vegas PD potentially solve a murder, and this is what Kading's thinking is, but instead you retire and you decide to go public with that information, shame on you for being a cop. Where's the professional courtesy? That's evidence that you should be passing on to this other jurisdiction, and you shouldn't be out there talking publicly about it.
When I first heard Greg Kading's narrative with Dwayne Davis and the whole slant on the Orlando Anderson narrative, I was actually very intrigued by it because it was a different spin on a 20-year-old narration.
Seeing this as his only option of staying out of prison for the rest of his life, and also being convinced that we knew what we were doing at that point.
Mr. Kading admits to having had several conversations with Mr. Davis prior to the infamous Proffer session. And somehow in these conversations, it comes out that Davis claims to have something to do with the shooting of Tupac.
So I contacted Mr. Davis, who was in prison, and I wrote him a letter. I told him I was a documentary filmmaker and that I was interested in his story. However, I was not interested in his story if his story was any different than the story that Greg Kading had told in his book, Murder Rap. Now, the reason that I did that, of course, was because I was trying to fish whether or not Mr. Davis would stick to the story that Greg Kading was telling, or would he possibly have the opportunity to tell me, no, the story I told Mr. Kading is not the story that I have to tell you. I have a different story to tell you. And in that case, either it could be a made-up story or it could be true, but just a different story than what he told Greg Kading. In either case, it was interesting to me enough that I wrote several letters back to him again and we agreed to meet. What I believe that you told Greg Kading was what Greg Kading wanted to hear.
Yeah. You get out of trouble, this mother talking about 25 years. I don't even have no fucking 25 years, right?
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
So the federal agencies are not going to just take over a murder investigation unless it's part of a much broader investigation.
The FBI told me to sue her.
Well, this is the thing,
But they said they came to my house right before his book came out. So this guy's putting your life in danger. You sue his ass, and the LAPD, city of LA, they told me everything. They do you want to move?
And with that book, a follow-up documentary, and a Hollywood version of his investigation, the Anderson narrative is given a new lease on life.
I had no idea about Greg Kading and what he'd already put out there. And when I became aware of it, that's when I told some of the people that some of these directors and producers I was working with and talking with, I told them this stuff that Kading's put out there is just flat out wrong. And I can prove it's wrong. And I said, how did this stuff even get out? I mean, who bought into this crap? Didn't anybody do their due diligence on what Kading was saying? And apparently the answer is no. I didn't even know the totality of all the bullshit that he had said. I just explained to them, this is the truth, this is what's happened, and they were shell-shocked because it was 100% different, apparently, than what Kading had put out there. And I said, well, look, he's wrong.
But if we have learned anything, we understand now that for every pound of pressure that pushes the narrative forward, there is an equal back pressure that works to repel any threat to that narrative.
Anytime new information is presented, there is an immediate response to try to spin the narrative back to it was Orlando Anderson and Keefe Davis in the white Cadillac.
The second most controversial thing that we've done is that we came across a letter that was we call it the confession letter, that was given to us by Chris Blatchford at Fox News. And this letter was given to him in 1998. They had mapped out this entire, not only confession that they were involved with the shootings, but why the shootings happened, what was all involved with it to begin with. We went to the LAPD first with a confession letter, and we met with the highest members of the Los Angeles Police Department. Kirk Albanese, who was assistant chief of police there, high-ranking captains in the LAPD, and Darren Dupree, who was Greg Kading's ex-partner. Russ and I gave them a copy of the confession letter. And within several days, that letter leaked. And we weren't going to even publish the names in the confession letter in the book until we'd had a chance to give it to the police first to investigate. Because who wants to be irresponsible like that?
No, of course not.
At the end of the day. So we did that. But again, like I said, nobody really has come back with, other than, oh, that's silly, a reputable
rebuttal to it, basically. Just say, here's so you
There's
said
a
this.
rebuttal online, and what the rebuttal they did is they went into a guy by the name of Robert Soria, who was the guy who gave Chris Blatchford the letter. Because he was the one who gave the letter to Chris Blatchford, they say, well, he all made it up. He's a paranoid schizophrenic, and basically attacked the messenger.
Shortly after RJ Bond and Russell Poole left the LAPD, I'm getting inboxed the evidence that they presented to them with a request to leak it out on the internet within hours of this meeting.
He's a piece, dude. That guy, he's just 100% bullshit. You know what that guy did with that damn video?
An example of shaping this narrative is On Machiavelli board, a Tupac forum, the investigator Greg Kading released a mugshot of Michael Moore and said, see, Michael Moore was there, and this is his mugshot from the night that he talked to police. The mugshot wasn't even a mugshot. It was for security clearance. It was a picture that had nothing to do with the case. This is how the narrative is being shaped behind the scenes and in public, and it should startle people that want truth, that want justice for Tupac.
I think that one of the problems that's plagued the Tupac Shakur investigation from the very start is that the only ones that seem to be willing to talk about the investigation are the ones that are willing to try to control the narrative or throw the narrative.
The judge is not going to let it go past today? If you didn't get lost and not get the subpoena today, I think you'll be fine. Yeah, Reggie.
They weren't willing to give any information. At least that's what Vegas police were told, and we know the reason why many of their testimonies were suppressed.
I was never interviewed by any of the police agencies, the FBI, nor Las Vegas PD. And I found that to be a little strange because for the last week, I was with Tupac, and I didn't get a single question from anyone about what I thought, what my theory was on what happened, nor about the Nextel phones where I had heard the conversation that said, God.
But what the police don't understand is that the same person that's pushing the narrative about the Orlando Anderson case is also actively suppressing the testimony of death row employees like Michael Moore, like Frank Alexander, people that had things to say, death row Dave Matthews.
At 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Las Vegas, at the Luxor, security was all brought together by Reggie Wright on the day that Tupac was shot, and we were told not to carry weapons. And did anybody ever ask why? No, because we were all armed. And did you find that kind of strange? We thought everybody after the fight at the casino, and everybody thought it was strange. That why were guys told not to carry weapons? Even the cops that were there told not to carry weapons. Everybody was told not to carry weapons.
Anybody that could provide information that might have been helpful to the Vegas police were basically stonewalled and frozen out. Meanwhile, they're telling the Vegas police, go chase the Orlando Anderson narrative, go chase the Orlando Anderson narrative, and that's all Vegas police had to work with.
The Tupac investigation was massive. It occurred in front of a lot of people. It had a lot of exposure, and it included a celebrity. Now that changes it into level B. Since you got a celebrity now, the celebrity has lots of friends that have money. And the first thing they do is contact the boss, contact the sheriff, contact the police chief. They don't generally contact the investigator. They don't do that. They contact the bosses that control the investigators.
He said it right out of his mouth, and his girlfriend confirmed it. Who, Reggie? Yeah. What did he say? Say what you did. He said they want me dead.
You know, I'd talk about Suge Knight and Reggie Wright Jr., I'd speculate, and I'd put information out there just like anyone else. I never knew Reggie Wright Jr., the man.
Frank Alexander, who was Tupac's bodyguard, who was driving the car behind him, was someone we interviewed. And again, that first night, I don't think he was totally forthcoming on everything he knew. His story basically matched everybody else's. As the investigation progressed and we started getting more information, Frank was re-interviewed, and Frank was very much more forthcoming. In fact, he gave a lot of information that really helped as far as what we were looking at. It was quite obvious that that information pissed off some people.
Well, a time came where I did find out about Reggie Wright Jr., the man, and I'll say this to you. You don't want to be on the wrong side of it.
Do you know how many people seen that shit in prison? Do you know 2 days after that shit went out, you know I got fucking raped?
I feel like if you go against the narrative or you go against the grain, that's when the life ruination stuff happens. All of a sudden, I've got pictures of my house on the internet. Police are coming by to do welfare checks. I'm getting pulled over more frequently. People are trying to leak things of my business partners, ruin my relationships, all on the hint that new evidence can come forward. This is what happens when you go against this narrative.
Because you ain't going to be able to say, oh, it jammed. It jammed when I was getting out of the trash can. I was in the trash can and it... You ain't going to be able to say that with me, nigga. They're going to be saying, oh, R.I.P. What they going to be saying, you come fucking with Reggie, R.I.P. No threats, promises, bro. No threats. I'm tired of playing with you. I've been playing with you, reading your texts last 2 or 3 days.
This is an incredibly destructive pattern of behavior. They'll do anything to keep that narrative alive. And if you go against it, you're toast.
They don't want you around. What did I just say? Period. He said it right out of his mouth, and his girlfriend confirmed it. Who, Reggie? Yeah. What did he say? Say what you did. He said they want me dead. It was. He said that they said you told a lot of stuff against Suge and Buntree and Pac. The police. I did. Yes, they said that they got the police report saying that you said that Frank, I'm putting my ass in. You said that you said that Suge was kicking, that Buntree was, Tupac was beating the guy up also. I never said any of that. Well, and she said that the people at DRR want you dead. I never said any of that. Well, neither here nor there. You know, I don't know what to tell you. Whatever you call here for me, if he answered the phone, and he do put me on the phone, make it real quick. He don't trust me at all. I know. If I had not quit, I think he's gonna fire me this week anyway. He don't trust me, period. I want to come to you. You said his girlfriend, Maria. What did he say to her? No, she told me that, asked me had I talked to you. I said, yeah, I talk to Frank all the time. I said, that's my partner. And she said, you know they bad at him. She said, Larry, they want him dead. He really said that, yeah.
It all makes sense now. Relatives Record came out in 2002, and that's how I ended up around Reggie Wright. I challenged him on graphics, of all things, for an album cover. And whatever I was doing, I was informed. Do not motherfucking touch anything. Do not fuck with our money. It wasn't until years later that I realized I had stepped into a situation, and I was the one that spoke the language to the distributor in order to get the advances. With something that you just said earlier in the interview, while we're doing this process, it made sense why he was so intense regarding releasing the album. Reggie was definitely delivering the album, and he thought I was stepping in the way, and I was only doing my job. What was crazy is it was on the old two-way pagers. I sent all of his messages on to one of my buddies so somebody had it, because I did not know what I walked into. I said, to hell with it, put it out.
When I didn't publish the information that they asked me to, I started being attacked about my personal life, my public life. I wouldn't say direct threats, but they were implied.
As time went on, this case had been reviewed multiple times by different investigators assigned to my section, but it wasn't until 2018 that this case was reinvigorated as additional information came to light.
My name is AJ Benza, and I'm an investigative reporter. 2018 is a magic number, but not for the reasons you might think. In 2018, a man by the name of Andy Donahue had the temerity to go to the Vegas PD and ask for a file on the Tupac case. 3 different times he sent FOIA requests to the Vegas Police Department, and they wanted nothing to do with the guy. Vegas is insisting this is an ongoing investigation, we can't release any information, but it's all BS. This goes on for a while, and the attorneys are up the Vegas Police Department's behind to try to get information, but the cops say, we can't give you anything because it's an active, ongoing investigation. So in this lawsuit, he basically tells the Vegas PD, you're not doing anything with this case. It's not active, it's not ongoing. So he says to them, since it's not active and ongoing, you have no reason to hold on to it. Let's call a spade a spade. So the Vegas PD is fighting this, and this goes on for a while.
The judge made Vegas PD produce an inventory of everything that is in the case file. Vegas had to then explain under what circumstances were they entitled to hold the records.
And I'm not even sure what they're fighting about because it's obvious that it wasn't ongoing. It's obvious they weren't doing anything with this case. But eventually, they have to give him something. There are 2,500 pages on this case, and they released 2 pages. What are you going to get out of 2 pages? So eventually, the Vegas PD loses this case.
The disclosure from Vegas PD was no surprise to anyone following this investigation. In fact, we learned, for example, that Vegas PD hadn't done a recorded interview with a witness since 1997.
Now, behind the scenes, there's a bunch of people in the Vegas Metro PD who know now they have to do something about it. They've got to show that this actually is possibly ongoing, this investigation, which it's not.
The bosses tell the investigator how they would like to see this handled.
So they dump 2 pages on him, and the Vegas PD appeals the case. But they're scrambling around trying to find something to make it look like, oh yeah, we're still on this. We're still looking. But they're not. Vegas appeals the case, and they lose. So what do? They take it all the way up to the Supreme Court. And guess what happens? They lose again. For Donahue, it wasn't so much about getting the documents. He just wanted to prove that this was not an ongoing investigation.
When Mr. Donahue received a copy of the 2 pages from the Las Vegas Police Department, one very important thing stood out to me, and that was the allegation by Detective Brent Becker in the report that the Cadillac was actually stolen and then recovered by the Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. In those case files, there actually is an evidence report from a vehicle that was stolen, and the police recovered it about a mile away from the shooting scene. Was it the white Cadillac? Well, that's what the report seems to allege. Why are we not hearing that from the prosecutor in Vegas? Why are we not hearing that from the Metropolitan Police now? Well, if you're Dwayne Davis and you have a defense and they've recovered a stolen vehicle and they've taken fingerprints and palm prints as they alleged that they did on a stolen vehicle, which may have been the Cadillac, the first question the defense attorney is going to ask were Mr. Davis's fingerprints or handprints on the stolen car when you lifted the fingerprints? If the answer to that question is then no, they weren't, you've got a real uphill battle from that point with a jury trying to convince them that Dwayne Davis did anything.
Based on police reports that are in the Las Vegas murder file, a car was recovered, but it doesn't say the make or the model of the car in the police report, but they say that they took fingerprints, latents, all that sort of stuff and gathered evidence. But if there's no documentation that explains why that police report of that stolen vehicle is in that file, again, a reasonable person would think it's in the file because it has to do with the murder. But why there isn't, I know in the FBI we would have what's called an insert, and it would basically be a description with the document attached to it behind, so you don't just throw a document in the case file and everybody's looking at it going like, well, what the hell is this all about? You have an insert that describes what that document is or what that piece of evidence is, and obviously why it has something to do with being put in the case file.
And you might ask yourself, well, then why wouldn't they just come out and say that the white Cadillac was stolen?
If this was just, I mean, I'm assuming in Las Vegas, there's probably crazy shit that goes on, such as stolen cars and all that all the time. Why was this particular stolen car put into this murder file, and the fact that it was recovered in close vicinity and in a close time frame of this murder? There's really only one reason you can really conclude why it was put in this file. It had something to do with the murder.
There's no downside to saying that the car was stolen and recovered versus you never got the car, which is what Vegas police are now saying. So you have to ask yourself which one's the truth.
Let me ask you a question. If you were the lead detective, would you want to be anywhere around from September 7th to September 13th every single year, the last 27 years, and answer every Tom, Dick, and Harry who has questions? And now that social media has blown up, there's so many more people outside of newspapers or curious reporters coming to you. It's a shit show. And that's what Donahue really wanted to show more than anything, that no one's doing anything about this. But if you're Vegas PD, you want to keep up the illusion that you're actually doing something about it. So you call it ongoing and active when it's not. So the Vegas PD has to prove they're doing something when they weren't. And suddenly, out of nowhere, they get a search warrant for Keefe Davis's house. And it's a big show.
It's the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. And the search warrant for the resident. You can come out with your hands up.
I mean, you would expect Siegfried and Roy to be there, or Chris Angel. I mean, they put on a show in Vegas.
I need you to put your shoes on. Put shoes on all the kids. And if you do me a favor, I need you to come out to the garage.
They made sure everybody knew what they were doing.
Put your hands up. Sir, you need to put your phone down. Put your phone down. Put your hands on top of your head. Hands on top of your head right now. Hold on, one more.
So you want to know the truth? Way back in 2009, Vegas police sat down with Keefe Davis. They had that interview. Nothing came of it. So why what he said in 2019 happens to be so important? They sat him down already in 2009. They got what he had to say. It doesn't make any sense.
You still have the Orlando Anderson, Keefe Davis narrative. You still don't have a gun. You still don't have a weapon. You still don't have an eyewitness. You don't have one single piece of physical evidence to even substantiate the underlying story other than the story that Mr. Davis has told. And they're saying that that's enough to convict him, but I have my doubts.
Instead of handle it truthfully and methodically, sometimes it gets sidetracked by the bosses saying we would like to see it happen this way, and if we don't see it happen this way, this could look bad. This could look bad. It could implicate the police department. It could implicate the powers to be, the mayor, the commissioners. It can involve anybody.
In our section, we knew at this time that this was likely our last time to take a run at this case, to successfully solve this case and bring forth a criminal charge.
So the reinvigorated Vegas team put together a grand jury and showed them 27 years worth of work. Well, that's not exactly true.
Instead of 27 years worth of work, Vegas prosecutors picked an unusual cast of witnesses to tell their story.
A Clark County grand jury has indicted Dwayne Keefe Davis with 1 count of open murder with use of a deadly weapon with a gang enhancement.
Grand jury has enormous power. The grand jury has the power to indict on a felony case. And, you know, the old adage about a prosecutor being able to indict a ham sandwich is true.
This grand jury has been receiving evidence for months.
They presented witnesses that have absolutely no personal firsthand knowledge of anything that happened that night. Reggie Wright said he was on the other side of town. Bobby Ladd was in Compton. He had no one that was involved in the shooting. No witness of the shooting is testifying except for Malcolm Greenidge. And he didn't have anything that he could add.
Grand jury has subpoena power, which is an immense power that the grand jury has. They can subpoena witnesses to come before the grand jury and testify under oath. And that is a very powerful tool that the prosecutor has, because you get somebody in there, you put them under oath,
they're stuck with their story at that point. Then you have it down and you have it under oath. So prosecutors use that power quite frequently.
We've conducted countless interviews and corroborated numerous facts that were not only consistent with the crime scene on the night of the incident, but also corroborated and were consistent with the sequence of events that night.
The witnesses that they used in the grand jury testimony to support the indictment against Mr. Davis were some of the most conflicted testimonies I've ever heard.
This ultimately led to us procuring a search warrant which was executed at Mr. Davis's residence in Henderson, Nevada. And following the execution of that search warrant, in close coordination with the District Attorney's Office, this case was presented to the grand jury, which ultimately led to Davis being indicted on charges of murder.
Prosecutor has basically no barrier to convening a grand jury. It's part of the prosecutor's job. It really does not take much of anything, either mechanically, legally, or any other way for a prosecutor to convene a grand jury. I mean, that's what they do. In many cases, the grand jury is an ongoing thing in larger counties, and it's very easy for a prosecutor to convene a grand jury.
Even Las Vegas's own police reports contradict some of the grand jury testimony that was given to indict Mr. Davis in the first place.
They're convened at the courthouse, sworn in by the presiding judge of the Common Pleas Court, and then the grand jury room is in the prosecutor's office.
Let's remember that most of the witnesses, except for Malcolm Greenwich, a couple of others, is dead. Everyone that's alleged to have been in the white Cadillac, with the exception of Mr. Davis, they're dead as well.
The standard in grand jury is probable cause. It's certainly not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's relatively easy for a prosecutor to get an indictment if they want to.
And that's exactly what happened.
Please, come over here. Hey, man. Come over here, all right? Thanks, buddy. Come on over here. Appreciate your cooperation, okay? I'm gonna stand right here in front of the car. Yep, Phillips. Yep, go and put it down. Put that down for a second, all right? You got nothing on here, right? Hooks. You have anything on you, sir? Thirsty? Okay, yeah, we'll get you a drink. Hang on, all right? Just want to make sure you got no weapons on you or anything, okay?
Thanks to the great work of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department under the leadership of Sheriff Kevin McMahill, Lieutenant Johansson, retired Detective Cliff Mogg, I am proud to announce the return of this document. This is the indictment we've been waiting almost 3 decades for. It spells out the facts and circumstances and what justifies a Clark County grand jury in returning an indictment.
And it's full of testimony from witnesses with zero credibility. Even Leonard Jefferson, the photographer that took that last deer in the headlights photo of Tupac, the last photo of him that was ever taken, his grand jury testimony actually contradicts what he said to Vegas police in the Las Vegas police files. He said in his grand jury testimony that he was so involved in the entire event and so close to the shooting that one of the people that were trying to help Tupac and Suge mistakenly tried to get in his car. By contradiction, the Vegas Police Department files say that at the time Mr. Jefferson told him he wasn't even around the scene.
We're not going to talk about any particular statements, but maybe he can address that, Globe.
I have said for a while, and I guess I'm still willing to stand on it, that if the case becomes a referendum on Greg Kading, Keefe D walks.
Then it's trouble. Then it's trouble.
I think they have a big problem because, again, the search warrant, fruit from the poisonous tree. The arrest, fruit from the poisonous tree. If everything that they base the search warrant on probable cause, let's say maybe they did come up with something new, but let's suppose that whatever that new thing was was rooted in some, I won't say malfeasance, but questionable tactics.
Right.
Okay. Everything that flows downstream from that is corrupted by that original thing. And the defense attorney just needs to go back to the source and say that the well water was tainted to begin with, and that everything that came out that he did on Gangster Chronicles and BET and all the things that he did there was based on an understanding that he had with this guy that he was an informant for. You know, that's really what it comes down to. There's no magic here.
That's why I think there's got to be something else, because there's no way I can imagine. I mean, this is so high profile, it's ridiculous in terms of the entire world's going to be watching this trial. I mean, Tupac is still a well-recognized, well-renowned, artist out there.
What I'll say is there's a lot of stuff that's going to come out when it comes time for trial, but he provides his own series of statements that are very consistent with the evidence that we have on the scene that we've obtained through our investigation. I'll leave it at that.
There are many cases in prosecutions where you'll have the testimony of a witness, in many cases an eyewitness, and no what we call corroborating evidence to back it up. Then it is the province of the trier of fact, whether it's a judge or a jury, to judge the credibility of that witness with no corroborating evidence to determine whether that witness is telling the truth or not. And a lot of times that's a tough job for the trier of fact. Again, if it's a bench trial, it's a judge. Jury trial, it's a jury.
And now we have to bring up the issue of the witness list against Dwayne Davis, because it's turning out to be something of a circular firing squad. Because on the one hand, Bobby Ladd is saying, no, I think Orlando Anderson was the shooter. You have Greg Kading saying, no, I think Big Dre was the shooter. And both of these guys are witnesses for the prosecution, and they can't get their story straight.
Well, I think reckless disregard for the truth could be classified too as perhaps sloppy testimony.
Prosecutors generally tell witnesses when they know that they're going to be testifying at a trial, especially a murder trial, is they tell them to shut up. They tell them, do not talk to the press, do not talk to the media, do not do interviews. The minute you do that, you become fodder for the defense to be able to shoot holes in your credibility.
Maybe not a bald-faced false statement under oath, but maybe hypothesizing or something like that. And that's where opposing counsel comes in and has to keep an eye on something like that.
Which is why they will even sequester a witness in a hotel room for a month prior to trial, because they're that worried about outside influence, or that somehow their testimony might change or might be questioned by the defense. So they tell them, shut up. They tell them, don't say anything. Yet we find all these guys are running around doing interviews, and that's got to be a nightmare for the prosecution, because the more interviews I hear, the more the stories change.
I want you to remember in your questioning that this investigation, subsequent arrest, and now indictment is only the beginning of the process.
Because I think it was laid out perfectly, but almost too perfectly. You have an incident at the MGM Grand, according to this narrative, and you have an immediate retaliation. It's a perfect story. But the more that you look into the events that unfolded that night, the more you start to doubt it.
And then we have this concept in law called fruit from the poisonous tree. Allegations of corruption within a municipality is definitely something that a district attorney or prosecuting attorney's office would take a look at it. It basically means that if the source of your evidence is tainted or unreliable, so is everything that flows from or comes after that first bad evidence, then the prosecutor will make the call whether it's a case that should be presented to grand jury.
From my experience in dealing with LAPD and a lot of the corruption cases that I was involved in that involved LAPD officers, they're very protective of themselves. They don't freely hand over information, and they when they realized they couldn't shut things down, then they wanted to be part of it to try to get ahead of things so they could obstruct it, which they did on some cases, and on other instances they got caught obstructing it, and my bosses finally caught on to that.
Was there any concern with the investigation that the LAPD had conducted and how that would conflict with the investigation that you guys were doing?
I'm going to choose not to answer that question.
I just don't believe a lot of the information being conducted there in LA was actually being shared with us.
You mean like that Dwayne Davis has been an FBI snitch since 1998? And what about the 12 to 15 times Davis informed for Kading's task force? And then you have the 2009 Vegas interview of Davis, being managed by Daring Dupree.
Las Vegas has jurisdiction on this. I don't understand why LAPD has such a vested interest, other than they want the publicity and the notoriety that comes from possibly solving this case. But this happened in Las Vegas's jurisdiction. I don't understand why Kading or anybody else at LAPD is just so entrenched with wanting to withhold information and just providing anything they can, resource-wise, as well as evidence, to Las Vegas Metropolitan PD.
And if you think a jury won't be confused enough, add Greg Kading's alleged federal proffer session with Davis.
Proffer deal is when you go into the prosecutor's office, the defendant always along with his defense lawyer, and you tell the prosecutor what you know. It's usually basically telling on someone else, another one that's charged with a crime or potentially could be charged with a crime. Your client spills his guts. The government then determines whether the information is valuable or not and what kind of credit that the person talking, normally your client, will get.
I think what people misunderstand sometimes is if I'm an LAPD officer or an FBI agent and I'm interviewing somebody and I bring them in and I kind of bring them in under this ruse of, okay, we're going to do a proffer, so you're going to kind of tell me everything that you know about this crime and any involvement that you have, and I'm not going to use that against you. That doesn't hold water.
We suggest you get an attorney and meet us at the U.S. Attorney's office or give us a call and let us know if you'd be willing to sit down and have a conversation. He calls an attorney. That attorney calls us. He says, when can we meet? We say, this afternoon is great. Why don't you meet us at the U.S. Attorney's office? And so that's what happened.
You have to have an assistant U.S. attorney write up a formal, legal binding obligation. Your defendant who's coming in for the proffer, in this case, it would have been, say, Keefe D, would have an attorney there. They would go over, the specifics of the proffer arrangement. Nothing's being promised, but nothing that he talks about can be used specifically against him. When you do a proffer session, and we've talked about this, the very first paragraph, it talks about a proffer agreement between, and you would list who the AUSA is, and you would list who the attorney is representing. In this case, I guess it would be Keefe, and all the ins and outs of the proffer session. That's on the first paragraph of the interview.
I tell my clients when they go into a proffer that the government will ask them questions that they already know the answer to determine whether the person is being honest and truthful or not.
And then once we get to that meeting, his attorney, representing Keefe, and the U.S. attorney have a conversation, and that's when the agreement to cooperate is made.
Okay, that's the proffer agreement.
That's the proffer agreement.
Prosecuting attorney is going to go back and make a decision as to whether or not this really has any merit or has any, any value to it. And they're going to send that over to Keith Davis's attorney, who's going to look at it to make sure that all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and he's not going to be talking about something that the attorney doesn't want him talking about. And then he's going to meet with his client, call his client on the phone here, what day do you want to do this and put together?
They've got busy days. You don't just call them up one morning and say, hey, I've got a guy that wants to come in and proffer. Let's do it this afternoon. No, it may take several days. It may take a week to put it together because you've got to make sure that the other attorney has their slate cleared out for whatever time period, let alone that same day, and that everybody needs to be able to make it down there. It's just that's not how these things take place. Like Keefe he wouldn't just come in and say, okay, I'm going to sit down with the U.S. Attorney's Office and I'm going to do a proffer session. This idea that you just bring somebody in and you sit them down and you interview them and you qualify that as a proffer session, no, that's wrong. It's incorrect.
This is just a situation where you sit down, you agree to honestly answer whatever questions we ask you about any criminal activity that you're involved in.
I tell my clients when they go into a proffer that the government will ask them questions that they already know the answer to determine whether the person is being honest and truthful or not.
The assistant U.S. attorney, they do all the questioning. Now, if I'm the case agent and I'm working with the assistant U.S. attorney, obviously I can interject a few things here and there, but I'm not the one that's leading the proffer session. That's the AUSA that's doing that. And in the recording that I've heard from Kading, he does all the talking. I don't even know if there's an attorney there. So that's not a proffer session. And also, when it's recorded, I think the recording that I've listened to where Greg Kading just starts doing all the talking, that's not how a proffer session works on the federal side.
But I've seen court documents where the state of Nevada claims they have no evidence of this proffer deal and can't validate its existence.
If there's no paperwork, there's no proffer session. It's as simple as that. It's a legal binding obligation.
And what it appears, and what y'all got to remember, is he don't want to be known. I knew my role. I know my role. I get shit filtered to me for being around to report to law enforcement if I had to or needed to be.
Have you ever played the what if game? What if I could have done this? What if I could have done that? What if I would have had my gun? What I would have done? I have put myself in this position in my mind many times to say, what if I would have had my gun, what I would have done. And I've put myself in my mind imagining jumping out of the car, taking a firing position and firing back into that Cadillac to where it wouldn't have been able to have gotten away. And I would have shot back and hit one of the assailants that shot Tupac. Whatever would have happened. And I continue to play it, not consciously sometimes do I play it. It just comes to mind and it just runs through my mind when I think about Tupac. The what if game. I've played that game for years.
When an investigation begins, you start with nothing. It's an empty table. You got to call somebody to begin the day, begin the work. It's not the cop's fault that they chose the wrong person. But if you keep going back, as Greg Kading did, the longer you go there, the more you're going to be split from the truth.
A multi-state drug ring with ties to multiple gangs and a Mexican cartel busted up in Memphis.
We're talking about 22 people were indicted this morning. The charges, and there are plenty of them, include drugs and money laundering.
Police confiscated more than 46 pounds of drugs. We have also learned the bus netted members of both the Grape Street Crips and the Petterol Mafia gang.
Federal prosecutors are accusing 22 gang members of shipping money through the mail from Memphis, 1,800 miles away to Los Angeles, California. Prosecutors go on to allege meth, heroin, cocaine, pills, and pot were all sent back to be sold here. It's a case acting U.S. Attorney Larry Lorenzi calls unusual.
The drugs that were sent to Memphis was a smorgasbord of drugs.
Investigators say 17 of the people are members of the Memphis Petterol Mafia, a local street gang that sells several kinds of drugs. The investigation started years ago when police found out gangs were selling drugs around the Bella Vista apartments. The investigation picked off at least one top-level OG.
It has stopped the pipeline where drugs freely flowed between California and Memphis.
Also indicted was Eric Avendado, who investigators say is connected to a Mexican cartel, but would not say which one.
They are using a variety of ways to move the drugs into Memphis.
I asked Lorenzi if an informant was used to help crack the years-long case.
We can't speak to the actual facts of the case or the actual techniques that were used to investigate. Good question, though.
In 2017, the man behind the curtain was suddenly yanked into the public spotlight. So was his father, Reggie Wright Jr., a former lieutenant with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department.
I think it was alluded to before. You would see instances where him and his father get out of trouble miraculously after being part of a major drug organization, right? And all of a sudden there's no charges, or he does very little time in prison, etc. I don't even know if he went to prison on that case. Did he?
Yeah, he was looking at 20 to 25 years and did 18 months.
Okay, well there you have it. So I say that to say it still is pretty astounding to this day, and it still boggles my mind because I think knowing that he worked with the FBI, knowing what you've been trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together with Tupac, I think that's an important piece of information to understand, because what I tend to see, and you've seen this historically, is when people are working with the FBI as informants, they sort of get this godlike complex. Look at Whitey Bulger. There's so many stories of FBI informants being like, well, I kind of have a free pass here to become a gangster in a way, because there's this sense that the FBI is going to protect them. I'm not saying that this happened in Reggie's case, but I could see his idiot brain being like, oh, well, I'm in bed with the FBI. I can fucking, be carte blanche here in the crimes I'm committing, or the sinister aspect of what I want to do. And maybe he did get away with some shit. I don't know. I don't have that answer.
Here's one way to look at the potential that a cooperator has out there. Reggie Jr. and Sr., they were federally indicted, get a very, very short prison sentence. Look at Sammy the Bull Gravano. He admitted to 18 murders, I think 18 or 20 murders, but gave up all this information to help the Fed finally get John Gotti, and he had to be willing to testify. That goes to show you that if you've got the right information and the government wants it from you, it's a pretty good bargaining chip. So my point is Reggie, just because he's a 5-year police officer, did 5 years at Compton PD, does that help open the door a little bit to say, yeah, then maybe we should sit down with this guy? No, what you really are going to do is, between that and understanding his background and the people he rubbed shoulders with and hung out with and the kind of position he had at death row and the people that he knew there, does this guy have potential information? Yes. But you also have to understand, he had ulterior motives while he was working at death row. So you can't just accept everything that he says as being truthful. You've got to corroborate it.
Keefe D was the first suspect in the murder of Notorious Big, and the cops really did go after him. I mean, they were doing helicopter surveillance, and they did basically a raid on his property, but very quickly they became convinced, no, it's not him. One, he had a solid alibi for himself. Plus, but when they talked to the people, he was at the Peterson Museum that night, and Biggie's entourage says, he and Biggie were like on friendly terms. They were hanging out, talking. Biggie told us, no, he's cool.
And thanks to Greg Kading, who shared documents the FBI clearly intended not to be public, We have learned that Mr. Davis was informing for the FBI in 1998 during the same period of time that the LAPD was investigating Mr. Davis for the Wallace killing.
Chuck Phillips intimated something like that when I think he had talked. I think he was the guy who hooked. I suspect. I don't know. I suspect he was the one who hooked Kading up with Keefe Davis.
Because everybody's after a money grab. I mean, let's face it. You throw the name Tupac or Biggie out there, and everybody's got something to say about it. Everybody's got something to sell paraphernalia about it. Everybody out there is to make a buck. And even if it's a complete false narrative and a complete lie, it just never ends. And there's certain people out there that are so entrenched in trying to make money and have made money on these lies and false narratives that they've been pushing, that it's almost like they can't stop. I mean, you're so deep into it now, you've got to keep it going. And there's people like Reggie that, you know, at one moment he will say he knows everything, and that's why he can speak as an expert on this and try to shoot everybody down. And then the next thing he'll say, he's got all this deniability that none of this stuff happened, and he wasn't aware of any of the security that was going on. And it's like, he's just a complete liar. He's completely non-credible.
I think that Vegas' bigger problem in the prosecution of Dwayne Davis is that Davis himself is not credible. He's told a couple different versions of the same story, and through all of my research, I've never been able to get a single person to verify either story. And it looks like Kading's task force was having the same trouble with Davis, figuring out which statement of Davis was true and what wasn't. And you know what? We're still trying to figure that out, even today.
I came on that Thursday.
That Thursday?
Yeah.
And the fight was on a Saturday. Y'all showed up on a Thursday. And if I'm not mistaken, the day before the shooting, you spoke to Suge Knight and Tupac, right? A day prior?
I didn't talk. Tupac don't know me. Tupac don't know me. Tupac don't know me.
With Tupac?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we had seen them the day before. They had pulled up in them Rolls Royces. At the MGM, it was Pac and what's his name? It was Pac. It was Pac. It was Pac. Tupac don't know me. Tupac don't know me. Tupac don't know me. So all the girls was around there. He came, you know, like a player. Came and shook my hand. He recognized a player. Came and shook my hand. What up, Keefe D? Give him a little hug. Boom.
But Suge Knight, you had...
Yeah, we was waiting on our cars at the valet at the MGM. And they pulled up in they Rolls Royces. And
tell me about that. Because that was a Friday. That was the day before.
Yeah, and he got out and came and shook my hand. What up, big dog?
Suge Knight.
Yeah. It was Pac and what's his name? So all the girls was around there. He came, you know, like a player. Came and shook my hand. He recognized a player. Came and shook my hand. What up, Keefe D? Give him a little hug.
Suge Knight.
Yeah.
Suge Knight.
Yeah.
Suge Knight.
Yeah. That's why I didn't understand why would they jump on my nephew the next day. I was stupid.
Okay, so he came up to you, he shook his hand. And
shook my hand. What up, big dog? What you doing? You know? And all the bitches, because all the bras was around him, and so they like, who the fuck is this dude? He must be powerful. He wasn't there the day before. He was just Tupac Shakur and the other boy. He wasn't fucking there.
To be honest with you, it is a known fact that Suge Knight and Tupac did, you know, come to Vegas earlier that Saturday.
Thank you. No, they came earlier that Saturday. They came earlier that Saturday. Earlier that Saturday. That Saturday. That Saturday. That Saturday.
Yeah, they wasn't there Friday. And the reason why I say that, I mean, I did a lot of interviews, and there's a whole lot of interviews out there.
I know Larry Chrome Jr. I know his daddy. And his daddy like this.
Yeah, Larry Chrome. Yeah, I did.
Larry Chrome Jr. Yeah, I know the daddy. Me and him like this.
Yeah, so I did an interview with him. I did an audio interview with him like probably 2 years ago. And yeah, he detailed having a run-in with Tupac and Suge Knight at the In-N-Out Burger.
went from the Rolls Royces over there to them Hot Wheels.
Right.
And pretty as that was Bentley Auroras back then. Pretty motherfuckers looked like Hot Wheels. Yeah, so I had ran into him the day before.
Okay. Okay.
Day before.
Okay.
I think it's incredibly deceptive to know Davis got jammed up in a lie and try to cover it up with very specific editing. It just shows they will do anything to keep that narrative alive and in the forefront.
In our last interview, you said that you ran into Suge and Pac the day before the incident happened, but people were saying that everyone actually was there. Everyone flew in the day of, so they weren't even there the day before.
Okay. It could have been the fight before, if I'm not mistaken. I'm getting older now. It could have been the fight before this fight.
And why should we trust Keefe D now?
You shouldn't trust Keefe D. You absolutely shouldn't.
And now we're here in 2023, and Mr. Davis is being charged with murder in Las Vegas. And so you ask the question, why now? Because nothing has changed. The Orlando Anderson Keith Davis narrative has evolved, but it still is the same pieces and the components. And in fact, they've even changed who they believe the shooter was. It's no longer Orlando Anderson. They've moved the goalpost yet again and charged a guy by the name of Big Dre with being the shooter.
Well, it's 27 years later, and we still don't know exactly everything we need to know. But we do know that it had nothing to do with Orlando Anderson.
They've named several witnesses and investigators that worked the Orlando Anderson narrative, including Bobby Ladd and Tim Brennan, who's now deceased, and Mike Coet, who was a Los Angeles County sheriff, worked in the Watts division that participated in the early days of that. What I don't understand is that now you have Mike Coet, who is one of the investigators, saying that Greg Kading is basically a liar. You have Greg Kading now going on YouTube videos saying that Mike Coet is a liar. And what they don't understand is that they're actually literally tearing this case apart for the Las Vegas prosecutors, who must be irate. And that puts you in an interesting position because you really don't know which one to believe. I mean, you got the guy pitching the Orlando Anderson narrative, you got the other guy pitching the Orlando Anderson narrative, then they're calling each other liars.
It's a nightmare for any prosecutor, and it's a nightmare for any detective. That's why you got to have a little bit extra on these cases. You got to have you got to have that smoking gun and able to present that case to a jury.
Do you foresee a prosecution in these cases?
With all the different clues and different theories that have been spoken about over the years, it will be a nightmare in trial. So that's why you almost need a smoking gun, so a judge can take a look at that and say, none of this other stuff is relevant. We're sticking with this. That's what they need to do, is streamline it. But right now, I believe prosecutors and police and both Las Vegas and LAPD, I think they would love to have this thing solved, but it's a discovery nightmare.
Basically, at this point, again, I'm just looking at the evidence that's been provided to me. I could walk in there right now and say, not guilty.
It ain't there. There's nothing there.
The easiest way to try to explain this is that it's a cycle of failures. The first time that they came up with a narrative, they tried to push it past the Vegas police. Every time the Tupac Shakur investigation has been restarted by a different team. First, the original investigators in Vegas, then the Wallace investigators, then the Greg Kading investigators, and then finally the new Vegas investigators. Every single time a detective has begun this investigation, one of the first people that they reach out to is the very person that is basically the information traffic controller, Reggie Wright Jr., who provides them happily the Orlando Anderson narrative.
You know, as a journalist, I've gone through, I don't know, a couple of hundred investigations. My father was an undercover cop. My father-in-law was a detective. My brother-in-law was a detective in New York. My nephew's a sheriff in Illinois. So I'm from cops. Other side of the family's criminals, but I'm from cops as well. So I know how things begin. That's part of the reason why I incorporated a cop's mind into journalism. When an investigation begins, you start with nothing. It's an empty table. You got to call somebody to begin the day, begin the work. It's not the cop's fault that they chose the wrong person. But if you keep going back, as Greg Kading did, to the Orlando Anderson narrative, the longer you go there, the more you're going to be split from the truth. They call Reggie Wright. He says the same thing over and over again, and it just goes in circles forever.
Well, I think when you have information like that, that information is power. And you got to understand at this time, you know, Reggie's already manipulating things or kind of positioning himself to... He's not only already in a good position with Death Row Records, but he's got higher aspirations to Death Row Records. And I think Reggie, he's not the smartest guy in the room, but he's got enough connections and enough people around him where he can make, I think, decisions that are in his best interest, but not maybe everybody else's best interest. And he's starting to pull strings there. And as long as Death Row people and LAPD people have control of this Tupac murder and Las Vegas PD does not, that sits just fine with them.
So now you have Reggie Wright Jr. secretly snitching out Death Row Records, while publicly he's throwing Kevin Hackey under the bus for his work with the ATF. Guess he has to keep his street cred.
But people kept getting steered back to that, and that's what causes a lot of the bullshit.
It's a big country. People go wherever, you know, we don't have tracking devices on them. So we have to depend on people that we know we can get in touch with to try and reach out to them.
I was never interviewed by any of the police agencies, the FBI, nor Las Vegas PD. And I found that to be a little strange because for the last week, I was with Tupac and I didn't get a single question from anyone about what I thought, what my theory was on what happened, nor about the Nextel phones where I had heard the conversation that said, got him.
Okay. Mike, why are you coming forward with this information now?
I'm coming forward with the information because someone asked me and I was willing to tell them what I knew.
But what happens when Michael Moore steps forward? Not only does no one care, but Kading actually goes on the offensive against this witness to falsely state that Michael Moore spoke with Vegas police the night of the shooting. This is an incredibly destructive pattern of behavior. They will do anything to protect this narrative.
This guy, Michael Moore, they came up with some plot, I think, or some storyline to help sell their DVDs and stuff like that.
Reggie Wright Jr. was the head of Right Way Securities and provided security for Death Row Records. For him to say that no LAPD officers, other than a couple that we've mentioned, that he was not aware of any of these other officers, such as Mack or Perez or Durden or Martin or Gaines, provided security at Death Row, Reggie's either the worst manager of all time of providing security, or he's just a fucking liar. Or both in this case, to be honest with you. He is. And it's a fact.
There's an allegation that you hired police officers Sammy Martin, David Mack, and Rafael Perez. Do you know Sammy Martin?
No.
Do you know David Mack?
No.
Have you ever met Rafael Perez?
No.
Okay, so how are these three cops? We know for a fact Rafael Perez and David Mack were corrupt because they got convicted. We don't know a lot about Sammy Martin, but how are these three cops, LAPD, linked to you?
I told you, by Mario Hammond.
Is it possible that Suge had relationships with
Rafael Perez, David Mack, and Sandy Martin, and you didn't know about it between 94 and 96?
Shit would have told me. And two, the main thing is, these are allegedly Kevin Gaines' friends, right?
And it's ridiculous that he keeps putting this false narrative that he wasn't aware of any of these guys providing security, or none of them were ever around that he ever saw. That is just a flat out lie, period. It is. And I don't think Reggie's just, sometimes he says things without thinking things through, but it's gotten to a point now where he said it enough times, it's like, Reggie, wake up. Nobody's buying this bullshit anymore.
And as long as the name Orlando Anderson was in the news cycle, they could go about the business of destroying anyone who did not believe the narrative, even going to the point of saying Tupac hated Frank Alexander. It wasn't true, but it was necessary.
I would like to address a interview question that Reggie Wright did on allhiphop.com. Reggie made a statement that Tupac didn't like Frank, that Kevin Hackey was the main bodyguard, and he liked Kevin Hackey more than he did Frank. Well, I could do a whole story on that answer right there for Reggie. First of all, nigga, let me tell you something. I was the main bodyguard. That's first of all. Okay, you're the one that called me, and I'm speaking directly to Reggie in this here. You're the one that called me and said, hey, I got good news, I have bad news. The bad news is you're not gonna get a pay raise. The good news is Tupac wants you to be his main bodyguard. This was in March of 1996, right after the Mike Tyson, Bruce Seldon fight.
Once they were inside and they were able to steer cops in Orlando Anderson's direction, they were able to keep anyone else with any other evidence out. But the problem for these guys was that the Anderson narrative kept collapsing under its own weight because it was based on poor witnesses, including Dwayne Davis himself. And shall we say, conflicted witnesses, like Reggie Wright Jr. or anyone from the Compton PD.
It's the inherent part of a witness that wants to be important. They want to feel that they're going to contribute a piece of evidence or testimony that's going to just change everything about your case. But once you slice through these people and examine it, you find out they really didn't. They heard it from somebody else who heard it from somebody else, and all they're doing is repeating what the actual witnesses have actually seen.
There were no personal firsthand witnesses to the shooting presented at the grand jury testimony. And that's important because if you don't have witnesses that have personal firsthand information, it becomes what we call hearsay.
Prosecutor is the one that's going to have to submit this to a jury. And if all the angles are not covered, everything that you can imagine, then we got a problem. And if the evidence is not credible.
A lot of people believe that a narrative becomes more powerful because more people say it, and they add more detail over the years, and it evolves, it becomes much more complex, so therefore it must be true or it must be real. Well, if that's the case, then Santa Claus must certainly be real, because even in the early days of Santa Claus, it was a very simple narrative. There was a man who gave gifts to kids, then you got the reindeer, then you got Mrs. Claus, then you got the elves, and then you have this whole detailed story about Santa Claus. But at the end of the day, is it true, or is it just what a lot of people are saying?
Recently, actor Alec Baldwin was given a loaded prop gun, which he used and shot a camera person to death. Could there be an act of criminal negligence there?
Protocols are a set of rules, not laws, that anyone in a particular industry would have to follow. It's standards.
Did she load the weapon? Yes. Did she check what she was loading? No. Why? Well, in her own words, she didn't need to be shaking the dummies all the time. Did she check after that? No. Have her concerns changed? No. Here's what she says. This whole thing has been a character attack on her. I'm not a monster. She and another are talking about how much of Hannah's life they could take up, and that this is messing up her modeling career. And what does she say about the death of Helena? Hannah is dismissive of the judge talking about someone dying as a result of her actions. Hannah says that people have accidents and people die. It's an unfortunate part of life, but it doesn't mean she should be in jail. I did not hear you take accountability in your allocution. You said you were sorry, but not you were sorry for what you did. You were sorry for it and hope they can find peace.
So why would someone in protective services not be held to the same standards?
Did you know it was dangerous in Las Vegas? Yes.
That's what I was doing. I went to MGM, saw that shit was hectic and all that.
Did you check to make sure your bodyguards had radios and were appropriately armed? No.
When you make all your guys work unarmed, it is a bright red flashing warning light that you need to turn to your client, Tupac Shakur, and say, hey, Tupac, this plan is bullshit. It's like they're setting you up to be killed. It could get you killed. I refuse to do it.
Did you even understand the tactical disadvantage your staff had in Vegas? No. And what was your excuse?
I've never had a bodyguard assignment. Everybody always say, you're a security, but no, I was always with you, making shit happen.
Did he check in with his security staff after the fight or Knight's house? No. Have his concerns changed? That would be a no as well. Here's what he says.
So that's why I'm here to defend him and say, hey, yeah, man, I might have been neglectful, but I wasn't intentional. But Tupac Shakur was dying. His date was written on the wall for September the 13th for him to die. I'm gonna be honest, Tupac called, cussing, going on. That was the last thing Tupac ever said. Nigga, I'm gonna spank your ass. Say another word. I promise you, I want you to. Let's play. Let's have fun. Let's have a 2024 great year, Negro. I'm so tired of this. I wish I was fired. R.I.P. That's what they're gonna be saying. You come fucking with Reggie, R.I.P.
I did not hear you take accountability in your allocution. You said you were sorry, but not you were sorry for what you did. You were sorry for it and hope they can find peace. The word remorse, a deep regret coming from a sense of guilt for past wrongs. That's not you.
As crazy as it sounds, sometimes, they say the cover-up is worse than the crime. And I understand there's a dead body over here. I get that. But when you look at the people that covered it up, it's beyond comprehension. And I know people say, oh, Phil Carson's crazy. This is the biggest conspiracy theory. There's no way you can get the somebody at the LA Times and somebody at LAPD and then somebody at the DA's office and the city attorney's office to all come together to help cover this up. No, it is true. And we know who those people are. We have audio recordings. We have the documentation. We have sworn statements for people that admitted they helped try to cover this thing up. And that's why I say the cover-up is worse than the crime, because of the people that were involved.
We're coming to full circle now. I don't think we're ever going to hear every single detail. That's impossible. Just like with the assassination of John F. Kennedy, we're never going to know exactly what happened. There's a few suspects out there. There are a lot of people that gained from his death, but there's going to be instances where you will never get the full story. You're just going to get bits and pieces, and you're going to have to be satisfied with the bits and pieces that you get.
When Hit 'Em Up came out, you got the feeling that things were about to get more explosive. Things were starting to happen. I was at the Source Awards when they booed Snoop and the guys from the West Coast, and Snoop we gave them some shit in the audience. You booing Snoop Dogg? You don't have no love for Snoop Dogg? And I said to my Dave, we got to get the fuck out of this place right now. Someone's going to pull some gun out. We're going to get shot up in an accident. And we left. Nothing happened, but it got popping. I think that's when things really started to get out of control. These guys got such huge egos, and it's not even them as much as it is the people behind them, these also-rans, these guys behind the big guy, telling them they can't be dissed this way. It almost reminds me of De Niro egging on Joe Pesci to shoot Spider in Goodfellas. You know, you can't talk to you like that. They got a lot of those guys in their ears. And I think that most of the time these guys could settle things outside of music. But once you start settling things on the airwaves, it gets messy. It gets really messy. People die.
It was at night. I believe I was in bed and I got a call from Daryl James, the owner, and he told me what happened, and I was, and I was just shocked. And I was, it was sort of like, oh, damn, because the way things have been going with Tupac, because he was so explosive, because he was so controversial, because he was so confrontational, you know, I was nervous for him. I was nervous that something like this would happen. I had actually gone to talk to an elementary school, and the teacher made the kids write me letters to say thank you. And in one of the letters from one of the kids, they said, be careful.
But he was magic. To me, the cats who were the biggest ladies magnets was Denzel, Big Daddy Kane, and Tupac. I've never seen anybody draw women like those three brothers, ever.
There's just no question that he was taken. You know, he was taken, like so many people are taken. Biggie was taken. You know, who was responsible for taking their lives? I don't know, but God knows.
I don't think he would not have been the wild, the rash young man. That's your youth. He's 20 years old. 20, you know, you put that aside, and he would have had all of that experience to push him far. You know, he would have been that, you know, push him far. No telling what he would have done. I know it wouldn't have, I don't believe it would have been 37 rapping, because his mind, he got bored too easily. You know, just because he was, you know, might not have done the 2 movies, but he would have done them and maybe moved on to something else, because he got bored easily. But the movies, I think, because he really wanted to do that.
I just get the feeling that after that first shooting, his life took on a different perspective. And I think he wanted to get as much music out as he could. I don't really picture him being a slave in the studio. I think he had that much to say. I don't know if you've ever been on death's bed or been ill in a hospital and doctors give you some bad news that this could go wrong, this could go sideways. It takes a lot to pick up a pad and pencil and write to people you love. I've done it once. It's a lot of work. To do what he did in the studio and really spit out so much about himself dying and all the things he saw ahead of him is remarkable. You know, we lost so much more than just a great rapper. We lost a magnificent person and a beautiful soul, really.
We never really totally counted him out. We just kept running articles and photos, whatever we had, because we were hoping that maybe he wasn't really dead, that we were going to hear from him. We actually did think that there was a chance that he was still alive.
The one thing I can say about Pac is he never lived his life as a lie. Sometimes I wish he had bent the truth a little bit to soften the edges so he could still be with us, you know. But I just think we're all fortunate because we had a chance to know Pac, you know, and he left us a legacy. But I still believe that he and Biggie both prophesied their death because they talked about dying and they glorified it and they promoted it, and death showed up.
The biggest thing that's bothered me about this case is that this case has been surrounded by death. And the problem that I had with the death surrounding this case is that none of it needed to happen, but it did. And to those people who were the irresponsible ones, who had no business making the decisions that they were making, I tell you, the dead, thank you.
The truth, John 8:32, will set you free. Read it, figure it out. I have nothing to lie about. I'm doing for my friend, for my brother, what I think he would have done for anyone else and stood up for in his belief.
People would accuse Frank and me to a large degree, of capitalizing on
They
that.
accused his mother also. So let's forget that. They said the same thing about his mother, about a capitalize and exploit. So that's neither here nor there. He was what he was, and he was a commodity in his head. He was the best that we had in terms of the ability to make money. And the documentaries and all of that, here's the thing. The good people do it and the bad people. If the bad people can do it, why can't the good people? If the people that didn't like him can do it, why can't the people that cared for him do it? If the person who's doing it now, who's behind it now, has a yearning in his soul and spirit, which I truly believe, to get to the bottom of it as far as he can go with it, to do all that he can to rectify that thing, to make that thing right, to make it okay, to make it as best that he can, to put out as much as he can about it, to make it right with himself and his soul. Why the hell not? Why stop that? That's something that he is a burning desire in him. You know what I mean? I don't doubt that. I do not doubt Frank Alexander's motives. Whether he make a buck or not. If he make a buck, amen, I hope he do. Whatever he gets from it, what is it gonna harm him? What harm has he done?
First came my book, Got Your Back. Read it. You'll love it. It was a bestseller. You'll understand it. You want to know the truth? Here it is right here. Read it. First documentary I did, Before I Wait. First documentary I did, Before I Wait. You haven't got it? Get it. You'll love it. Watch it. It's a good one. It's great. Tupac, Big Frank. Tupac, Big Frank from Before I Wait. Get the DVD, Amazon.com. Most of your other retailers, look for it, you'll find it. Tupac assassination. We got it. Conspiracy or revenge. This is the one. Get it. You'll love it.
Pop will said y'all punks for not doing it. You're a punk, Frank. You was dead for not doing it. Why wouldn't Frank think that what his bond was Pop was his bond? What he felt from Pop, how can I say he didn't feel it? He hasn't shown anything to the contrary. I don't know anything different from Pop, however that was. Frank came to his mother, asked permission every time. I got your back, got that, saw it, could I do it, that, read it, whatever. She never said I don't like what he's done. You know, he came to his mother. He became a Christian. He changed his life around. It affected him in his spirit. What can I say?
When Pac died, it hurt me a lot because at that time of his death, I had gone through other deaths as well. And you were absolutely right. When we close our eyes, we're not guaranteed to open them the next day.
I think that the reason a lot of it was covered up is because most people that worked for death row security had a badge of some type. They were either law enforcement officers, they were fire department officers, but all of them had a badge of some type. And they were able to pull their badges out to get in and out of certain situations. And I think the ball was dropped right there. I think people had badges, they didn't want to push the issue, and they chose to overlook looking at death row. And when I look at all what's happened with Rampart, people that we had working for death row where we had Los Angeles police officers working within the organization, Compton police officers working with inside the organization, that is where it failed. People had badges, people had careers, their badges stopped us from getting to the truth.
Yeah, one thing that always struck me odd was, because I went back to New Jersey and I talked to the detective and actually got his entire case file, is Tupac's...
Was that Ufula?
Yafu Fula.
Yeah.
He was there in Vegas, and I think it's his mom that had the, kind of helped raise Tupac or something like that.
Yeah.
He stated that he was an eyewitness to that shooting and knew who shot Tupac.
And I said, we need to talk to Yafu Fula, but we don't know where he's at. And they said, yeah, we'll set you up with it.
He goes back to Jersey, and like a couple days before the police are gonna come out and talk to him, he gets killed execution style.
Well, next thing you know, we're getting notification from, I think it's in Orange, New Jersey, if I remember right, that he's been murdered in a housing project or something like that.
And they did a full investigation on that, and I remember I talking with the detective, and he gave me his entire file on that, because they don't know who did this execution on him, and I believe he was with his girlfriend at the time, so it's not like they waited. They wanted to get him, and they wanted to get him then, before the cops went and interviewed him. And I always just thought that was really odd that they would let such an eyewitness like that go all the way back to New Jersey and be off on his own and not get out there, quicker, or give him some type of heads up or protection or whatever. And they lost a key witness like that.
I think it's the journalists who are going to end up solving this case, because the police departments aren't putting the effort in to, first of all, they're not listening to people. There are witnesses out there that the police never interviewed. And of course, RJ has interviewed quite a few of those witnesses that have never been interviewed by the police department. And so what we can do is force them to do it by coming up with the information ourselves.
I think we were blessed with Russ. I think we were blessed with the fact that every effort that he made to try and find the truth. The truth is perfect. And unfortunately, that's the essence of investigations. But not once did I ever see him give me anything that was not what he believed to be the truth, or what someone had relayed to him that believed it to be the truth. We can all make mistakes, but Russ did everything in his power to do it right, because he was a pro.
I think it's sad that he's not around. I think Russ died when he was pretty young, and I think he could have continued to offer information and leads with all of this stuff.
I answered the phone. It was my brother-in-law. He goes, Megan. He goes, oh my God, I'm glad we found you. And I said, what? What's going on? He goes, Russ is dead. And I go, what? Because Russ is dead. He started crying. And I said, what? Yeah, I kept saying, well, because I didn't know what else to say, because I don't think I was hearing it right. And he said, Russ is dead. And I'm going, oh my God. So I'm thinking car accident, because I knew he was going, so I'm thinking car accident. I'm going, what? What am I hearing? And so I took a deep breath and I said, what's going on? He goes, well, the sheriff's department contacted Russ's mom, because they couldn't find, any other numbers on him or whatever to contact anybody. And I called the kids, and they all came over. Well, Jennifer, she was in Texas planning her wedding, going to school full time and planning her wedding. And this is August when this happens, August 19th when Russ passes, and she's getting married in October. And the first thing she said to me was, Mom, who's gonna walk me down the aisle? She goes, I need him to walk down the aisle.
that was just too much to bear. So, yeah, I know. We never got to do this, did we? Oh, I'm glad we did. I'm so glad that you were his friend and in his life. And I really am, and I'm sad. I'm really sad that things went the way they did, and I don't think he really realized how he was being pulled.
You know, a lot of people have asked me, because I had friends, Frank Alexander and Russell Poole, who have died during the making of the assassination series and writing the books and the Tupac investigation in general. And they asked me if I do these movies because of them, and I certainly do them in memorial of these people. But I look at life as kind of a relay race. Nobody runs the whole race by themselves. Everybody needs help. So the job for guys like me is to pick it up, continue to run with it, and actually make it right for those people who can't do it for themselves. And that's what keeps me going every day. I will tell you, it wasn't more than a week ago I had a dream. Frank Alexander was in the dream. And Frank Alexander told me two things. He said, be cautious and keep going. And that's all I needed to hear.
See, RJ, this is what we get for you not being here reading the questions to me so I can just answer them. So yesterday we did this interview and it came out like really good. And today it's gonna come out like crap because it ain't gonna be the same motivation. It's not gonna be the same dialogue because it was not scripted. It was live. I've already tried to, I had my positive mental attitude all built up for like a week. And I lost it after yesterday when you said the mic was off.
RJ, here's your phone. Listen, remember I told you the phones were there.
Scratch that. Let me start it. Okay, RJ, just disregard all of that, okay? Because I'm looking at Rick and we're trying to figure this out, okay? Are we working? Okay, we're working. Okay, here we go. I was fired. They fired me. And I collected unemployment. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I did. They fired me. They did. Yeah, Reggie did. You know, I guess he had no choice too, though. But yeah, I was fired.
And listen. Yes, I did answer that question. I was
fired.
Yeah, I guess.
I'm out.
One or 2 days after Tupac was killed, Death Row called a meeting for all their security.
Should call the meeting. All the artists were instructed to come to this meeting. Certain security was invited, and I happened to be one of them.
And in that meeting was Rafael Perez, David Mack, and Gaines.
The meeting was basically about what happened, and the artists were drilling security about what methods we had used and what were some of our tactics.
When the security team was dismissed, Rafael Perez and David Mack stood back, and that's when Reggie and Dave Kenner told them that they needed to find someone to take care of the business. And that business, I believe, was to kill Notorious B.I.G. and P. Diddy.
Dark and